I mean, the curious part about this part of the hill is there's all kinds of ditches and little ponds that people dug by hand in the olden days. In order for them to do that kind of work, there has to be a deposit somewhere. Say, they're going to have to follow them sheep. Where did they go? What did they do? What did they know that I don't know yet?
The storm hung low over the Yukon, dragging with it a silence that felt older than the trees. Snow whispered across the valley floor, burying old trails and flattening even the sharpest ridge into smooth, colorless memory. At the edge of this forgotten wilderness, inside a log cabin blackened by decades of soot and oil, Tony Beets leaned over a cluttered table. Maps, permits, and soil reports lay scattered beneath his elbows. The stove hissed, casting a red glow across his boots, but Tony barely noticed. His eyes were fixed on a courier box sitting in the middle of the floor. It hadn't come through normal channels, no signature, no truck, just appeared, out of nowhere, left on his porch, like a curse from the woods. Wrapped in dried animal hide, the bundle was tied with what looked like copper wire, stripped from an old dynamo. The smell coming off it was sharp, earthy, metallic, and something else. Inside the wrappings, nestled in a rusted gold pan so pitted it looked like it had seen 3 wars, was a folded parchment, map-sized, stained, brittle, and marked with dark red ink. Along its bottom edge was a half-faded stamp, Black Creek Syndicate. If you've been following Tony's hunt for lost Yukon gold, now's the moment to hit like and subscribe, because what he just found might rewrite gold mining history. Tony's brow tightened. That name hadn't been spoken in years, and never sober. The Black Creek Syndicate was a legend among the oldest miners, men who didn't joke about gold, even after 6 drinks. A crew from the 40s who'd reportedly struck it rich in a remote zone called Devil's Backbone, then disappeared without a trace. The government called it an avalanche. The locals said the mountain took them back. The map showed topography that hadn't been surveyed in modern decades, but Tony's instinct zeroed in on a marking just east of Hunker Creek, an area officially unclaimed. That alone was suspicious. A valley that size, never staked. He checked the Dominion Land Survey records, flipped through a dusty permit ledger, and found it an error. A misfiled page from 1946. The claim had never been legally processed. It was, by all records, untouched. But that wasn't all. Beneath the map, buried under layers of cloth, sat a crushed VHS tape labeled June 1982. Site 9. Tony hauled out an old player from storage. Kevin had kept it for laughs and pushed the tape in. The screen flickered with static before revealing 3 men huddled around a wash plant. Their faces were red from the cold, their voices thick with awe. One of them held up a nugget that nearly filled his palm. Pure, raw gold. Another pulled something from the creek bed, circular, shining, bigger than a coin. Then the feed snapped into chaos. The camera jolted, screaming erupted. One man shouted something unintelligible, and the frame caught a blur of movement in the tree line. Dark, tall, wrong. The camera fell sideways, picking up snow, blood, and silence. The tape ended there. Tony leaned back in his chair. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he stood, pulled on his parka, and called the crew. They were going north. By dawn, Tony's caravan was clawing its way across frozen ground. Heavy gear swapped out for sled-mounted wash plants and chained haulers. Roads didn't reach the Devil's Backbone, and the valley didn't welcome guests. The farther they went, the stranger the terrain became. Gnarled trees, frozen streams that trickled upward in defiance of gravity, and a wind that didn't sound like wind. It took 2 days to reach the site. the valley opened like a scar in the land, flanked by the ridge lines that curved unnaturally inward as if the mountain had tried to fold in on itself. As the sun rose over the crest, Kevin pointed at something on the hillside. A dull glint, half-buried, too round to be natural. Tony climbed up and dug with gloved hands, revealing a warped brass compass fused to a rock. Not broken, just wrong. Back down in the clearing, the crew uncovered scattered tools, old chisels, cracked wooden pans, and the shredded remains of canvas tents. One shovel had been driven clean through a tree root, as if someone had died gripping it. A nearby plaque, rusted and crooked, bore the words, "Property of Dominion 9. Do not disturb." That night, Brennan, one of Tony's newest hands, found a half-rotted pine stump with a false bottom. Inside was a weathered wooden box packed with deteriorated dynamite caps and a single piece of parchment. The ink was faded but legible. It read, "Depth 37, don't go beyond." Tony stared at the note, then tossed it aside. By morning, he had a test dig marked out. They deployed a compact wash plant and began stripping the topsoil. Within 2 hours, the sluice tray shimmered with color. Gold, not dust, not flakes. Chunks, smooth, unblemished, glowing faintly in the sun. The kind of gold that wasn't supposed to show up on the first day. The air turned strange after that. Radios crackled with static. Lights dimmed without power loss. Wind patterns shifted, blowing from every direction at once. Kevin swore he heard whispering in the trees. Tony grinned. "This place is just old," he said, chewing the corner of his glove. "Gold makes it weird." On day 4, the excavation hit something solid. Kevin's excavator stopped cold, steel teeth slamming into wood. But it wasn't a root. They uncovered a beam, horizontal, reinforced with riveted iron. Not a log. A trap door. They dug deeper, revealing the mouth of a collapsed shaft, framed in timber so old it crumbled at the touch. No records showed a mine ever existing here. Tony ordered the camera lowered. What came back stopped them cold. Skeletal remains. 2, maybe 3 bodies, curled under rockfall, bones shattered, tools still gripped in bony fingers. One skeleton wore a leather belt, stamped with the initials JS, matching Jacob Strathmore, one of the 4 missing miners from the 1946 tragedy. But it wasn't just bones. In one hand was a nugget, melted, twisted, solid gold, but shaped like something once alive. It gleamed under the floodlight with unnatural sheen. The weight was measured later, 14 ounces. Pure. Tony made the call that same day. Emergency transfer, private claim, no cameras, no public notice. For safety, he said. As the crew sat silent around the campfire that night, no one spoke about what they'd seen. Not the bones, not the gold, not the claw marks etched into the walls beneath the trapdoor. Tony didn't sleep. He watched the mountain instead. "We didn't kill them," he muttered low. "The mountain did. We just showed up late." The excavators tore through the permafrost with grinding persistence, metal teeth ripping into ancient stone, as Kevin maneuvered around the collapsed shaft like a surgeon carving into bone. The crew worked without music, without banter. The silence wasn't planned. It was instinct. Something about this ground told them to shut up and dig. Then the shimmer appeared. Kevin hit something strange. A dense formation buried deep within the quartz that caught the light in a way no rock ever should. A long, continuous strip of gold threaded through the soil like a lightning bolt trapped in stone. But it wasn't just a vein. It twisted. It moved, not literally, but in its design, its shape. It curved, doubled back on itself, and coiled into unnatural spirals, weaving between chunks of basalt and fractured granite. Kevin leaned over the trench and muttered, "It's not natural. It's like the earth was drawn on purpose." Tony climbed down to see it for himself. The vein spanned at least 20 feet, snaking under boulders and vanishing into the canyon wall. He dug his gloved fingers into the exposed segment and chipped off a piece with his pick. It was gold, thick, smooth, bright as sunlight, and too pure. It didn't have the flecked impurities typical of Yukon deposits, no quartz inclusions, no black sand veins, just metal that almost glowed from within. Tony didn't trust what he was seeing, so he called in a geologist, quietly, off the books. The man arrived 2 days later by bush plane. He didn't give a name, only credentials. Real ones, Tony checked. Within hours, the samples were tested under portable XRF scanners, and the verdict was clear: ultra-pure gold. Some of the richest ever pulled from the Klondike. The geologist frowned deeper the longer he worked. He said the composition suggested pressure and temperatures not found in near-surface veins. According to him, the gold should have formed miles deeper than where they found it. Tony asked him to explain. The geologist just packed his gear and said, "Whatever this is, it doesn't belong up here." As the crew dug deeper into the vein, strange things began surfacing. Old Dean miners who lived along the riverbanks came up the trail one morning uninvited. They didn't cross the sight line. They just stood at the tree line, watching. One of the elders, eyes like frost-bitten stone, stepped forward and asked only one question. Did the serpent show its spine? Tony, arms folded, didn't answer. The elder nodded like he already knew. He spoke of a legend. The golden worm, a spirit said to sleep beneath the peaks, its body threaded through the mountains, made not of flesh, but of gold. If disturbed, it cursed the land. Rivers would shift, mines would break, and men would turn against their own hands. That night, motion sensor cameras placed along the perimeter began going off, one after another. The crew scanned the footage. At 3:14 a.m., a long, low figure skulked across the edge of the dig site, too fluid for a bear, too slow for a wolf. The frame was blurry, but its body glinted under the moonlight, metallic, segmented, coiled. It vanished before reaching the shaft. No one slept much after that. 10 days passed, in fever. They worked non-stop. No breaks, no radio chatter. The wash plant ran day and night, hurling gold through the sluices like water from a spring. By the end of the 10th day, the tally had reached over $375,000 in raw gold, all from surface-level extractions. Tony kept the books hidden, but the crew saw the piles grow. They knew. That's when things started to fracture. Arguments broke out over claim corners. Men stopped sharing tools. Brennan was caught stuffing flakes into the lining of his boots. Others began hiding samples in lunchboxes. Kevin found one crew member, Jared, whispering to himself beside the hopper at 4 a.m. Jared claimed he was talking to the gold and insisted it had shown him something buried deeper. That same afternoon, the sluice box exploded. No one saw the build-up. It was as if the plant had reached its limit, choked on the volume of gravel and fractured gold. A steel bolt blew free and struck Jared in the face, throwing him back into a rock pile. He survived, barely. But later that evening, security caught him trying to crawl into the main tent, with a duffel bag filled with bright grade samples. Tony had seen enough. He ordered the entire day's haul to be reprocessed and sorted manually. What they found split the camp. Roughly 70% of the gold was ordinary. Hard, cool, slightly reddish Yukon grade. The rest, the bright gold, was different. Its edges were too sharp, its luster too constant. It didn't flake or smear like normal placer gold. Under heat, it didn't melt smoothly. It resisted. More strangely, it was warm to the touch, even after sitting out all night. Tony separated the samples and began journaling his thoughts in private. His final note that night read, "Either the gold's alive, or we've lost our damn minds." 2 days later, the mountain gave them another answer. A cave-in hit the western trench. No injuries, but enough to collapse an entire storage line. When the dust settled, a previously hidden shaft stood exposed, half buried behind a wall of frozen mud. It wasn't like the first. This one was reinforced with steel, not timber. Thick iron bars, riveted plates, and hand-welded supports. No records showed any mine ever existed here. They forced the door open and stepped into a long, narrow passage carved directly into the mountain. The air was dry, dead. The walls bore strange carvings, Ouroboros symbols etched in looping reptilian curves. Every few feet, an engraved serpent consumed its own tail, forming a twisted spiral that made your eyes feel wrong if you stared too long. Further in, Kevin discovered something embedded in the wall. Drawers, not wooden ones, metal drawers fused into the stone itself, as if installed a century ago by someone with access to tools no Yukon miner ever carried. Inside the drawers were hybrid tools, chisels and hammers forged from a steel-gold alloy, unlabeled, impossibly smooth, and tucked behind them torn fragments of a notebook written in frantic French. The final legible sentence, scrawled 3 times, read, "Nous avons réveillé la spirale. Aucun or ne vaut ce prix." We awoke the coil. No gold is worth the price. At the tunnel's end stood a vault door, welded shut from the outside. Charred metal ran along the seams, and across the middle of the door were handprints, burned into the steel, as if someone had tried to claw their way out. Kevin reached for the handle, but Tony stepped in front of him. He didn't touch the door. Not yet. He just stared at it and said, "We're not done. Not even close." On the 21st day of digging, everything changes. The sluice run spits out chunk after chunk of dense, brilliant gold. By the time the sun crests above the tree line, they've already weighed over 800 ounces. Beets stands in silence, staring at the figures. $1 million, raw, unrefined, in a single haul. It's not just a gold strike, it's a deluge, the kind of payout men dream of, but never live to see. He mutters, "We just struck the fucking heart," before demanding every scale be recalibrated twice. The announcement draws unwanted attention. Within hours, 2 helicopters buzz overhead, media teams trying to grab aerial footage. Tony curses, waves them off, and issues a site-wide blackout. GPS tracking on all loaders, haulers, and even phones is stripped. He knows this isn't just about money anymore. It's about control, secrecy, and legacy. He marks the dig site with a steel post and engraves it with a plasma torch. Dragon's spine. But the gold isn't normal. The samples recovered from the $1 million haul aren't just larger, they're different. Under microscopic analysis, they form fractal geometries, like repeating patterns etched by intelligence, not nature. Even stranger, some pieces flicker with faint sparks when touched, even without friction. Kevin thinks it's static discharge. The geologist calls it impossible. Beets doesn't say a word. He just adds the oddest nuggets to a locked case marked D-spine, do not melt. Then the mountain howls. That night, while the guards rotate shifts and the diesel generators hum in the distance, a sound echoes through the valley. Not a wolf, not a man. A long, deep screech with an edge like tearing metal and the growl of something wet and breathing. Cameras pick up only flickering shadows near the tunnel entrance. Tony listens, jaw clenched. "The fuck was that?" Brennan mutters, gripping his flashlight. No one answers. The next morning, Rick Ness appears, uninvited. He's scouting for next season, or so he claims, but his eyes linger too long on the newly cleared ridgeline and the dig site's direction finder. Tony doesn't confront him directly, but two guards with mirrored sunglasses start tailing him at a distance. Later that night, a motion sensor goes off near the north perimeter. One of the crew intercepts a man dressed in all black, holding a parabolic microphone aimed toward the sealed tunnel. He won't say who he works for. Tony doesn't press. They dump his recorder in the burn barrel. From that point on, the site becomes a fortress. Cameras installed. Armed men at the gate. Even Discovery's own film crew is locked out unless pre-cleared. Paranoia brews. Tony's never been this protective of a claim. Then the diesel tank incident happens. Brennan finds wires attached to two small charges wedged near the base, rigged but not triggered. Sabotage. Tony immediately suspects corporate poachers, maybe even Ness, though he has no proof. The crew is shaken. Tony, just angrier. A week later, a message arrives via satellite. An investor offers $5 million cash for the rights to the site. No questions, no contracts. Tony doesn't even entertain it. He laughs and replies, "You couldn't afford the curse that comes with it." And then it happens. The mountain moves. It starts with a tremor, barely perceptible at first. The pay dirt pile shifts. Two excavators parked nearby tip, then vanish into the earth. The ground splits wide like a cracked tooth, swallowing gravel, tools, and $250,000 in gold-laced rock. What's left behind is a gaping pit, an unnatural sinkhole. Kevin shouts, but his voice is lost in the echo. They lower a heat sensor drone into the darkness. What it returns is impossible. An underground chamber shaped like a dome, with walls lined in scorched basalt, and something hotter still beneath it. In the center, stacked like offerings, are gold ingots, not like modern bricks. These are long, almost Roman in style, stamped with a symbol no one recognizes. A kind of Ouroboros, but twisted in on itself. Tony stares at the feed, eyes wide. He orders the chamber sealed off temporarily, but his mind is already racing. The furnace they uncovered, there's no fuel, no oxygen. Yet the thermal images pulse with heat signatures, as if the chamber is alive. Back at camp, Kevin confronts him. "We've lost 3 machines, 2 weeks' worth of pay dirt, and nearly died. We have to stop." Tony doesn't look up from the drone feed. "The gold keeps coming," he says. "It's like it wants to be found." He says it too calmly. That night, Kevin finds his father scribbling into a leather-bound journal, the same one he's used for years. Tony doesn't notice him watching, but the last line, scrawled on the page before Kevin leaves the room, reads, "Something old is waking up." They slice through the vault door, with plasma like carving through armor, sparks hissing into the cold air. No lock, no hinges, just a seamless block of metal that finally gave way with a screech and a shudder. The moment the seal broke, a rush of air, dry, stale, ancient, pushed past them like the vault had been holding its breath for centuries. Inside, the chamber was flawless, a perfect square, each wall coated in what appeared to be gold, but not raw, not cast. It was blackened, scorched into the surface like gold that had been set aflame and never cooled. The walls shimmered dimly under their lights, not reflective, but absorbing, as if drinking in every glance. In the center of the room, resting atop a pedestal of obsidian, was a single object, a book, sealed in clear, amber-colored resin, its title etched into the surface in ornate faded script. Regnum Aurum, Latin. Kevin read it aloud. The Rain of Gold. Tony stepped forward and placed one gloved hand on the case. The resin was warm. They carried it out under heavy guard, treating it like a relic or a bomb. Back at the command tent, they broke the seal using diamond-cut rotary blades. The resin splintered reluctantly, like it didn't want to let go. Inside, the book was impossibly well preserved. Vellum pages, metal threading along the spine, ink that gleamed with a reddish shimmer. The languages inside shifted. The first third in Latin, the middle in Dutch, and what Kevin identified as early Finnish. The final sections jumped to Greek and something that might have been Proto-Slavic. It wasn't just a journal, it was a guide. One passage described waking the vein as a ritual, not just mechanical mining, but an interaction, a coaxing, a communication. Another warned, feed it earth, not blood, or it will hunger for more. Kevin laughed nervously, but Tony didn't. He read the line 3 times, lips moving, then slammed the book shut. The last page was missing, torn, not worn, but what remained mentioned a second chamber beyond the fire, and something called the Gilded Root. The tone wasn't one of discovery, but of warning. Tony said nothing to the crew, not a word. The next morning, he declared the site closed. No vote, no discussion. Just a blunt announcement. The mine was finished. He paid everyone out. Big. Bigger than most had ever seen. Brennan hugged him. Kevin didn't. Some crew loaded trucks in silence. Others drank hard and fast, never to return. They all spoke of the gold strike, but in hushed tones, as if the wealth came with a cost they couldn't calculate. Over the following days, the entire valley was buried, intentionally. Haulers dumped gravel over the entrance. Bulldozers rerouted streams. Markers were pulled, maps burned. From the air, it looked like untouched wilderness. Tony even disabled the site's GPS footprint permanently, erased it. The samples? A few were kept, but only Tony knew where. A hidden vault, some said, locked beneath the floor of his old shop. Alongside them, he placed the torn book, the drone heat maps, and something else. 2 maps marked with serpentine symbols, pointing to locations deeper in Alaska's wilds. Kevin asked once, "You gonna go back?" Tony shook his head. "It found me, not the other way around." And then he said something he'd never said in all his years of mining. "I found it, but I don't think it's finished with me." Word spread, slow at first, like embers drifting on wind, a valley that bled gold, a pit that burned without fuel. Miners from Fairbanks to Dawson whispered about Beets's claim, but no photos existed, no location, just stories, ghost stories. Tony turned down every interview. Not once did he confirm what they'd found. But a Discovery producer, half drunk at a rap party, recalled hearing him say, "If I told you, you'd never sleep again." Kevin went silent for months. Then suddenly, he disappeared into the bush, solo, searching. Not for gold, but for anomalies, as he called them, magnetic pulses, sinkholes, places where nature bent just a little too far. Historians argued about the truth. Some called it Yukon's last myth. Others dubbed it the ghost mine. No one could verify anything, and the Beets family refused to talk. The legend grew in absence. The final image? Tony Beets, alone in a cabin far from Tamarack. No cameras, no crew, just him at a worn wooden table. The stove clicks faintly in the background. Outside, the The wind howls like something half-remembered. In his hand is a small gold fragment, no larger than a tooth. It pulses softly, still warm, still alive.